All right. Well, this is Tim Allen from the FlintCreekCourier.com. I'm here with Documentarian Jim Jenner here in Phillipsburg. And Jim, thanks for joining us today.
You bet.
So we're going to talk about this brand new movie that I have had an opportunity to see. It is absolutely awesome. Whether you've lived here a long time or you're new to the area, it's a great way to learn about Phillipsburg, called Saving the Burg. And in fact, let's go ahead and show this off, Jim. This is their movie poster right here. And man, really nice poster. Unique design too, but man, what a great shot of the city and stuff.
Yeah, Michael Chilcote has done wonderful commercial and scenic shots here in town, and this is a very iconic image of town. A number of years ago, wonderful sunset picture.
Yeah, no kidding. That's just you got to be in the right place at the right time for that.
Yeah, absolutely.
You got to stock those things, right? So, how did this whole project come about? Where did this thing get its genesis?
Well, it was born of the fact we were going to have a sesquicentennial, and several years ago, Mike Young and Diana Young were working here locally with the Sesquicentennial Committee, which ended up being part of the Arts Fund, because the Arts Fund's a nonprofit. And I was on that group, and one of the things they said was, we'd really like to do a film, and we did posters and events and a speech and all the other things to celebrate the 150th. But and they know my work from, which most people in town don't know, but I've done a couple of films on Route 66, one of which was on PBS, and I've been filmmaking many years before I came to Phillipsburg. But they had seen some of that and wanted to let's do a historic film, which is a kind of a neat idea, except,
sure,
around here, that's a kind of a movie about what used to be.
Yeah.
Boy, back when we were really a mining town, and we were really logging town, and I've certainly done some work like that, but what seemed to me a story that would have more legs and would be of more interest to people is what's happened in the last 30 years. Because for those of us that have been here and were early investors and worked on trying to bring us back from the brink, it's an amazing story that was done really without any outside support. It was totally an organic thing. And so I said, you guys, my heart's not in a let's celebrate St. Louis mining companies. They're long gone, and they took our money with them. But let's look at what we have done here that's won us a number of awards. And so I was able to take a look in a span of time to present day, obviously, but going back, there was a book, Tim, that was done by the University of Montana it was published in 1991.
Right.
But it was based on photographs taken by a journalism class in 1987.
Yeah, you cover that in that first part, and that's really well done.
And I remember the book, and it was just this wonderful, dozens and dozens of pictures of Phillipsburg, warts and all. It was not it was a very real, not to be mean or anything, it just presented all the things that we had in the mid-'80s. And I used that, and then I also found some wonderful people who lived here then. And we ultimately interviewed, I think, 35 people for over 30 hours, and then boiled that all down. It's an hour long. But the purpose of it is to show how did we go from somebody like Mary Jo Byam saying, yeah, in 1987 we couldn't get out of here fast enough, and nobody stayed because there wasn't really anything going on.
Yeah.
The sawmills had closed, the mines had long been closed, and economically the place was kind of on its way to becoming a ghost town. How do you go from that to winning the Sunset Magazine Reinventing Community Award, which that was, to me, and as well as other things that we've been featured in. So I tried to tell the story of what happened in that 30-year span so that people today who come in and, you and I know there's an event going on in town right now that for the Brewfest, you can't park in town. There's people from all over the state. There's a bus that people have come. They love to come to town now. That's changed in the last quarter century. And so this is a story of kind of how it happened on almost a case-by-case basis.
Yeah.
Because it's really important to realize that it was, I like to tell people, it was a blend of hard work and serendipitous. It was serendipity that we got pretty lucky.
There were the right people were in the right place here. My first trip out here was in, I think, 2010. And my wife was out here for her grandmother's, they used to do a thing for her every year on her birthday, kind of a family reunion. And my wife, she says, we have to go to Phillipsburg, just to this candy store. You have to go to this candy store, which there's a little segment on in here. And you roll into town, and it's like somebody miniaturized you and put you into a train set when you turn up Broadway. It's this incredible, and I think somebody told me at the Sesquicentennial that Phillipsburg may have more of the original brick buildings than just about anybody else in the state. There's been fires and stuff, but they really are intact.
Yeah, and we were very lucky because, there's a lot of good things about being off the beaten path. I mean, we're 30 miles off the interstate. We were small enough. There's other communities where people made a lot of money with urban renewal. They came in and said, oh, that old building, will pay us to tear it down, we'll build a new one. And, Anaconda lost city blocks to urban renewal. Helena, places like Last Chance Gulch, where they tore down marvelous old, Victorian-style buildings to put up Walmart style. I mean, we've been lucky to be bypassed enough. But one of the things people forget is the bones were here. We were lucky enough that, at one time there were 3 foundries in this town. There was, they built buildings out of stone and brick and things that have lasted. Where Drummond, for example, built primarily out of wood. Right. A fire is much more detrimental. But the thing that this story is about is that in the late 80s, early 1990s, things got so, the prices of buildings were so low that local people would not really want to invest because they'd seen it do nothing but decline. Right. But there were quite a few of us. I came over here fishing in the 1970s with my dad, and I remembered Phillipsburg, and came back and looked and said, wow, what a wonderful place to be. And look at these historical buildings. But they were gnarly. They hadn't been painted, and but a lot of people bought individually because they were cheap enough. And this story tells one fellow who bought 5. Right. Some of us only had 1. But there are all these individual stories of people fixing something up. I mean, we have a National Historic District that was, in 1988, was made of an 87-acre original town site. But so many of those individual buildings in there that were fixed up were done by people that also said, let's work with our neighbors, or let's do something to try to get some traffic here. And obviously, the number one thing that they started to do was when the Sapphire Gallery started in town, that was based on the fact rockhounds have been coming here for a century. Yeah. And then live theater was something that was possible again. The candy store was an offshoot of Dale and Shirley deciding that they could do one more tourist thing adjacent to their existing Sapphire store. Right. And candy's what a wonderful, it's something everybody wants to get a bag of, and it when you're on vacation. And when you're in that place, it's not just candy. It's you look at something and immediately, like for me, I remember when it was they had the little bite-size not milk dud, but the bars that were the really chewy caramel things. Right. And because I took a tooth out that way. And immediately you see that and you think of that. Right. Because there's all that candy from your childhood. And these buildings, really, I guess, were at a point where people felt like they could take a flyer on something, and if it failed, it failed. If we got something out of it. Yeah. One thing that, if you look at economic development, basically, one thing that happened was almost the entire downtown, when you look at all of these buildings that are in this picture, almost every one of them in about a 5-year span sold, and there was a whole new group of owners. A lot of them were young people in their late 30s or 40s. I mean, young in terms of economics. And because most of the people that had owned the buildings here, including the bank, they thought the value might go down to nothing. Yeah. That some of these buildings, there was a serious thought of knocking some down because they were more of a liability than they were an asset. Man. And so when you take a community and you get all these new owners, and we didn't have a lot of working capital. A lot of us did it just as oh gosh, I can buy a building for $20,000 or $30,000 or $40,000. But then we started doing the things that, like painting them and fixing them and gradually bringing them back. That's really what the story is about. Is that we call it a story of love, sweat,
And
and
beers. I love that.
And sometimes we've changed this to love sweets and beers. But the arc of the story goes from, in the 1980s, this very talented group of young students came from the U of M, took a lot of these pictures, and luckily the journalism school and Patty Rexton, the woman who wrote the book, as her master's thesis, gave us full access to that. We invited two of the students from that day, who had, one of them hadn't been here in 30 years, flew him out here so he could walk around and go, wow.
Yeah.
We have that kind of moment in time of the late 80s, and then we tried to show how many different things were part of this saving process. It wasn't, and as much as the sapphires and candy get enormous attention because they advertise so wonderfully all over, but there's so many other little incidental parts. Part of the one story people forgotten is, why is the post office still downtown?
Yeah, and that was a great thing.
How did the museum happen?
Yeah.
And why are there streetlights?
Yeah, and the story of, I think the building you own, isn't it the old mercantile building? That in itself, and how that got developed and brought back, and the painting is just, I think there was one picture in there you had. I think you may have shown it and then faded from a black and white to the picture of where the brewery is now.
Right.
That is an amazing transformation just in paint.
Yeah, I was really blessed because this story, this is about my hometown, so you're worried you're going to not get it right. People are going to get upset with you. But I had two wonderful people who work with me. Jordan Leffler is our editor, and he and I, we do a lot of corporate videos and other things, but Jordan, who lives in Arlee and stays here with us on a weekly basis, he's a great talent in terms of, and what you see in that show is a lot of things where we were able to take some of the marvelous computerization, where you can take an old image and a new image and show that transition. And what you're talking about is, we took a picture that was in a catalog from the Mesker Metal Front Company.
Oh, wow.
It was a
I didn't know that's where it
image.
came from. Wow.
It was a catalog image, and we tied that in perfectly in the computer, so you see what was somebody bought out of the catalog, and then it becomes the Sears building where the brewery is, and you start to realize, oh, wait a minute, that looks that way because they bought that front and attached it to a finished building in 1888. I think those kinds of things, Jordan was able to do that, and it really helps people understand what the transition was. We took a picture, for example, of the Mercantile, where H&R is, and the hotel, and what it was like when it was, the fellow I bought it from, it was empty, no revenue, he had to pay taxes, and so people would paint all the buildings, if they painted them at all, but typically one color.
Oh, yeah.
Because it was cheaper than doing all the detail. And then you dissolve from that to present day, where all the wonderful little details have been painted, and you realize what beautiful buildings they are.
Yeah.
And that's what started to happen little by little. Really in the summer of 91, the bank, which had repossessed the Sears building, which is the brewery, they had that painted, and they had two local fellows who did it and did a wonderful job capturing all the detail. And I think the show's an hour. We're going to premiere it on Thursday the 21st, February the 21st at the
There's hopefully still a few tickets left for that?
I think there's tickets, and it's limited seating. If we sell out, we'll probably do another show because it's all for charity. The Arts Fund is really, it's been around since 1999, and the Sesquicentennial became a really large effort that they did. If you see these before and after posters in town and other stuff, we've done a lot. But this film, it's neat because we did this, and one other person that helped was Lacey Grosswald, who's actually lives in Anaconda, but has worked in Phillipsburg, and she was in television for quite a few years in television news. So I had Lacey and I had Jordan, who don't live here, helping me tell a story when I live here. So I think I got that wonderful blend of they're saying, you really have to use that story. And I'm going, everybody's heard that story 100 times. And they're going, no, even if they heard 101 times, it's too good a story.
Yeah, and for people like me who weren't brought up here, those are great stories to hear. I mean, I'm sure there's stuff in there I'm sure there's stuff on your cutting room floor I'd love to know,
Well, and the thing that, the Sesquicentennial, really, one of the things that that you have those celebrations for. I mean, it's 150 years, and it's not just to look in the rearview mirror, because we can be thankful that we're here, that we're still here, and it is a vital place, and people's homes have retained some value, and the school's still going, and we still have a hospital. I mean, we are still a community, and it was a close call. But I think you also, I'm hoping that people like yourself and others that understand they love Phillipsburg, they're maybe not even quite sure why, but they can appreciate how much work went into having it where it is today. Because I think we're gonna have to work just as hard to keep it the way we like it, as opposed to having it change too much.
Sure.
But this is really a story. This is not a story about change. I think this is the best thing that I like to talk about is that it's a blend of natives and newcomers like myself who didn't really change anything. We just went to what was already there and respected it and cared for it and brought it back.
Yeah.
And in many cases brought it back from, I mean, they did some terrible things to these buildings in the 70s and 80s in order to save energy. They dropped all the ceilings or bricked up windows. We are lucky that we have so much beautiful architecture and a small enough amount of inventory that we could do this and people could see the result. I mean, it's pretty hard to imagine this done in a bigger place. Butte's got so many buildings to worry about; it drive you crazy.
I think what I got from this was, this has really got and like any good movie, it's got a lot of different things that are playing here. There's a story of a town that was pretty much dying, and it's really a comeback kind of story. But then there's an overwhelming sense of pride in everybody you hear talking about, not what they did, but what everybody did, right, and how this place looks. And I think one of the guys who I know that I've talked to before in some other interviews, Mike Young. Mike Young is very proud of his store, but Mike Young is very proud of Phillipsburg. He looks at the brewery or the mercantile or the gems and the candy places, and he's proud of all of that. Right. And I think if they saw something happening, they wouldn't look at it as, oh, he's a competitor, I'm not gonna, they'd go, hey, your light's out down there, and we want to, let you know so you can get it, fixed, because they're proud of the whole thing. It's like everybody owns their own business, but they all kind of own all of it.
Well, and the one thing to remember is this is a small enough town, and it's far enough from anything that we're all kind of in the same boat.
Right.
And we may disagree with how somebody's pulling their oar, but we're all in the same boat. I mean, if somebody's going to come to town for one thing, it might be good for somebody else, but they have to come here first. And we've been fighting that. We've been bypassed by major civilization ever since the days of a century ago when the first roads came through, yeah, and then the interstate. But we've been doing a better job now of making people, when people come, one of the things I like to mention is this is a town that has no franchises. You're very likely, the odds are that the person helping you at the cash register owns not only the building but the business. People don't get that much anymore. We had a wonderful event where the head of Blackfoot Telephone came and was given an award at the Chamber of Commerce, and he talked about you have to be proud because you're so authentic.
Yeah. And
I love that word because it's one of the things that all we did was take what was here and respect it like the original people that built it. And that story to me is a lot more interesting than the original people that built it and the original people that profited from the mines and the timber and all that. In most cases, they came as opportunists. In some ways, they wanted to build a town that would last forever. In other times, as soon as something changed, the vein was gone or whatever, they're on to the next. We're talking now about all this comeback stories done by people who came during dark times and made it brighter.
And I think that's part of the charm of Phillipsburg is that it really is kind of a throwback to 100, 150 years ago in that, towns like this didn't have a Sears and Roebuck store or a Kmart or a Target or whatever. Is it a hassle that you want to get something at a Walmart or a Target and you've got to drive 90 minutes to go to Missoula or Butte or wherever you want to go? yeah, it's a little bit of a hassle.
Well, it's coming with the UPS man now.
But how often do you have to do that? Really? I mean, that's the beauty of this. There's a grocery store here. Heaven knows, unfortunately, we lost that in Drummond. But it's got what you need, and there's good people running it, and you know the people behind the register. It's really a remarkable thing.
Well, the Phillipsburg is had good luck in some ways. I mean, number one, the people that got interested in saving it, but the way it was originally built, the materials they used, the way they laid it out. What's interesting is, I don't know if you've been to Disneyland or Disney World, but you know Main Street USA.
Oh yeah, that's exactly what it feels like.
But what's interesting to people, they think that's old America, and they're right. That is a 5/8 scale of Walt Disney's Missouri hometown.
Oh, I didn't know that.
And that's how they laid those out. They were, the buildings came right up to the sidewalk. They didn't have setbacks. They didn't worry about parking and everything else. People could walk around, and that's what we have here. And a nice wide street so they get the ore wagons up and down. But I think we still, if we're lucky, people will realize that we have brought it back from the brink, and now the authenticity and the quality of what people see, the quality of the experience they have, and the friendliness. People always comment on how friendly the town is.
Yeah.
Those are the things that I think will now give us a baseline economy. Tourism is not necessarily the biggest and best you can get, but it beats empty buildings.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. And of course, we were talking a little bit before. There's a fine balance there of how much tourism do you want? Because like we were saying today, there's a lot of people in town, hardly find a place to park, but you want them to come, but you don't necessarily want to tear apart the fabric of all this stuff that's been built.
Yeah, and we're probably at that moment where, because economically things are changing in terms of distance doesn't mean what it used to, and I have my neighbor here works on internet sites all over the world and makes really good money, and he wants to be here because he can fish and hunt and do. I mean, those kinds of people are the ones that can add to the economy. And one of the chapters in our film is called "Comeback Kids" because for the first time in a generation, there are young people who are the children of my friends here who are actually coming back because there is enough of an economy, either for them to start a little business or to plug into something that's already here and going. That to me is, when you look at some of the other, like our neighboring, both Anaconda and Drummond, where they still have a serious problem of losing, the generations that have to go somewhere else because there just aren't the opportunities.
Yeah, you can only work so long at a gas station or a restaurant.
Right.
And they're just, there's only a handful of businesses there to begin with. So, any graduating class is challenged just from that standpoint.
Right, and we were pleased because we incorporated some people who were really here during the dark days and thought it was going to be a ghost town. That
one gentleman who I remember when they were talking about the brewery, and he said, I thought they were crazy for putting the brewery in. And you got to give him props. He said, I really called that one badly.
Leroy Owens, he was a part owner of the White Friend. I mean, he knows a lot about how this used to be a drinking town. But that's one of the things. That there are a number of those things that when the Sapphire Gallery opened, they'd lost more than a dozen businesses the year before. It closed on the same street. And then here comes candy, and who's going to come? Is anybody going to get off I-90 and get a bag of candy? I mean, all these things that we've tried have paid off. And obviously the brewery, that's why we said in beers, because that building is so iconic where they are, and it was the last of kind of the last piece to go down in the puzzle that showed that we really brought the place back.
Yeah, it's just a really wonderful story, and you guys did a great job on this. I just got to say it again. Like I said, my wife grew up here, and she saw people and things that she brought back great memories for her and stuff she didn't know. And then for somebody who, I've been around here a little almost 4 years now, and to learn all that history in 1 hour was just incredible, kind of thing. Jim, I thank you for your time. It's going to premiere February 21st.
At the old fire home, Phillipsburg, and you can get tickets at the Stuff and Such, at the brewery, I think at Camp Creek Grill. It's only limited seating, and if that sells out, we'll probably have another another showing, and then it's going to be on Montana Public Broadcasting PBS in April.
Okay, so if you get some dates to that, let us know, and we'll make sure we publish those.
April 18th and the 20th and the 21st is what we heard. So,
there you go. So we'll try and get that.
Which is neat because, you know, that's one of the things. It's great to have a movie that we can all get together as a community and watch. But this story, when people around the state see it, I think it's really going to give the Phillipsburg story. It's going to flesh it out. People are going to understand. We know that, you know, people around the state know that Phillipsburg's been on the comeback, but this will help them understand. And I think it may give some of these other communities a little hope that, hey, this is not an unreachable goal. Yeah, you know, that's one of the things that, I mean, I don't know anybody that really quit. We just kept trying to get a little better. And there's, you know, it does give you hope. Well, I'll tell you what. We're going to, whoops, let me go to where's the wide angle there? Hold on a second. There we go. So we're going to, thanks, Jim, for your time. And now we're going to show you the trailer for this, which is about, what, a minute and a half, 2 minutes? A couple minutes, yeah. And so, but it'll give you a really good idea of what this thing is, and you got to go see this. If you don't get to see it in person here in town, you're going to want to go see it on PBS when it plays, and we'll make sure we repost those that Jim gave us in the interview. So, Jim, thanks so much. You bet. Thank you. All right. Glad you enjoyed it. Thanks. And now the trailer for Saving the Burg.
When I think of Phillipsburg in the 80s, I think gray and dreary and hopeless, really.
This town was dying. You could buy houses for as low as $1,500. It was pretty much a ghost town.
When I came here, every man that wanted to work could go to work.
I remember the day the Anaconda Company shut down. I come home here and my wife was crying. She said, people don't realize what this is. And boy, that was the end.
They believed it would go on forever. Everybody did. And when that happened, it was like, oh dear God, what could happen next? It was a terrible time because you saw people that you cared about that had to leave because they couldn't find a job around here.
We really didn't have much going on, but we had the beautiful architecture, the great ironwork, the great buildings. We had signs of the wealth we'd once possessed.
It was truly already built, but the spirit was gone. The spirit was gone.
The year before, 13 businesses closed on Main Street. So this was not something that was a guarantee by any means. As a matter of fact, we practically got laughed out of the lumberyard when we told them we were opening a jewelry store in Phillipsburg.
And it took people with a vision.
This new group of people, little by little as they came, they were willing to take risks again. It was a wave of risk takers.
Well, today, the people that bought empty old buildings in the early 90s look like geniuses. Back then, everybody thought we were nuts.
The first thing I remember is when they started painting the buildings.
If you don't have a lot of working capital, a coat of paint is the fastest way to show the patient is still alive.
The community has really been great. They've come together and put something that was dead back to life.
And so it took every bit of tenacity, every bit of everything from everybody to make this work.
Yeah, it was a great place back in the day, but it's even better now.
I absolutely love it. I am so proud to be from here, and I'm so proud to come back and see this.
There's no place like this place.
I am very proud of Phillipsburg.
I'm not a religious man, but something's working. Something's working.